My name is Josh Wymore. I work with our global sites within Spring Arbor, so none of you have probably ever seen me because I'm not on campus that much. But if you don't know, we have 11 sites around the state of Michigan and Ohio with working adults who are going back to get their bachelor's and master's degrees. Got admission staff and student development staff at those sites. I oversee those 11 sites and try and make sure that they are coordinated, they have the resources they need, all those sorts of things. So, yeah, it's fun to kind of dive into stuff on main campus a little bit. Thank you all for getting out of bed and coming over here. I think that is an admirable choice on your part, and I trust it'll be a good use of your time. So, yeah, today we're talking about humility, which I know our focus series is about this idea of nationalism and what that means for us as scholars, as Christians. And this is not kind of the typical topic that's happening today. So I think it'll be interesting for us to figure out how these things interrelate. There's a huge amount of interaction here. And so it'll be fun to dive into that discussion together. You ready to participate? Because there are going to be some questions. We're going to have some discussion, go back and forth a little bit. So here's where we're going today. We're going to talk about pride and humility. Realize that pride is our greatest enemy and humility is our best friend. We'll talk about what humility actually is because we don't understand this concept very well, quite honestly. We're going to talk about the freedom that comes with humility and what it looks like to cultivate and practice this virtue. So let me start by saying that this topic is one that I'm probably not super qualified to talk about, which I know as a speaker you're not supposed to say that. I'm not a super humble person. I think I'm better than I used to be, but I definitely wasn't always interested in this at all. What got me interested actually was coaching softball my junior year of college. If you've ever known someone who got promoted with questionable qualifications, I was kind of the poster child for this. So I was our assistant softball coach at the college I went to as a junior, having played like a year and a half of high school baseball, and that was it. Basically, I'd been tutoring a bunch of the softball girls and hanging out with the softball team and thought, hey, it'd be fun to help out with the team, manage a little bit. The assistant coach left, and so by default, I got promoted to be the assistant coach. And so I'm like preparing for this gig, right? I've got half of the team I'm responsible for coaching outfielders and stuff like this. And I'm thinking, okay, these women who are 20, 23, they've been playing softball basically their entire lives since the age of 4. I played like a year and a half of high school baseball. So they're going to see right through me, and they're not going to trust or respect anything I have to say at all, because they're going to know I'm a fraud. So what do? I'm like reading all these books about softball, trying to get ready to go, but I'm realizing, okay, they're not going to respect me. What can I do to make sure I'm respected? And so I thought, okay, this is going to be my plan. I'm going to be the most confident coach they've ever had. So when I give a direction, they think I know what I'm doing because I'm really confident in myself. Right? It kind of makes sense, right? Makes sense? Yeah, sure. Practically, it actually didn't work out that well. It turns out that when people can smell the BS, even if you're confident about the BS, they kind of call you on it. And adding to the difficulty was we had some kind of feisty women on the team that weren't exactly like the take order types. They kind of push back a little bit on everything. Some of you maybe know these people, some of you maybe are these people. And so one player in particular, I'll call her Lauren, I'd say, okay, here's what we're going to do, this is the drill. And pretty much immediately she walks over, hey, I don't think we should do it this way, I think we should do it this other way. Well, again, my philosophy, I can't seem like I don't know what I'm doing, right? So it's like, no, this is the way we're going to do it, get in line, do the drill. You can imagine, if you're being told this by like a 19-year-old guy, wearing cutoff shirts because he thinks he's awesome, probably not going to be received too well. And so we just went back and forth, and it was one of the most emotionally exhausting years of my life, just trying to coach this team. So next year, our coach leaves, and we get this new coach. His name is Brad. And Brad is a very different coach than our coach before. Our coach before had been high highs, low lows. He's loving you, and he's excited, or he's kicking buckets of balls across the field, very emotional and kind of oscillating guy. Brad comes in, and Brad is just super chill. Talks in this low voice, hey, how's it going? Yeah, how you doing? Just really laid back, and I'm thinking, this guy's gonna get eaten alive by this school. It's he has no idea what he's getting into. They're just gonna run over him because he's the opposite of confident, or at least in the typical way we think about confidence. He's just super chill. And so After practice, one day he asked two of the captains to stay behind. They were two of the more feisty players. And I'm like gathering stuff up, and I see these two girls walking past me, and they have this like kind of dazed and confused look on their face. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, well, we just had this meeting with Coach, and it was kind of confusing. He was saying all these things to us, but they were really like hard to hear. Like he was telling us that we need to step it up, and we're not doing our jobs, but he was so nice about it that I couldn't really be mad about it. And they were just kind of like dazed and walking off. I just kind of chuckled and thought, oh, that's funny. So like 2 weeks later, Coach asked me to stay after practice. And we have this conversation about me butting heads with one of our pitchers. Just kept going back and forth. And so he starts talking to me and sharing in this super kind and generous way that, you know, basically I need to man up, stop treating this player this way, and like be an adult. And it was said in this way that was so kind and loving and showed that he cared about me that I'm like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Like, I'm processing what he's saying, but I'm like, this guy's got like a superpower, because I can't be mad at him right now. I gotta figure out how to do that thing that he's doing right now. What is it that he's doing? And a big part of that was his humility. And so that's what kind of started me on this journey of thinking about what humility is, what it means for us as Christians. Was Brad, his superpower of humility. So we'll talk about this a little bit more today. So first, before we talk about humility, we got to talk about the other side of it, which is pride. I'm going to show a clip from one of my favorite comedians, Brian Regan. Anyone Brian Regan fans here? Yes. Okay. This is Brian talking about what he calls the me monster.
I'm actually kind of quiet off stage. A lot of people don't realize that. I was at a dinner party recently. A bunch of people that I don't know. One guy talking plenty for everybody. And then me, myself, right? And then I, and then myself, and me. I couldn't tell this one about I, because I was talking about myself, and then me. Beware the me monster. So I tried to jump in with a little story. I don't want to just sit there the whole night. Right when I'm done with my story, this guy goes, that ain't nothing. Oh, well, didn't mean to waste everybody's time. Telling my nothing story. Here, let Marco Polo speak. He's back with tales of adventure. My story ain't nothing. Maybe it wasn't, because I made the mistake of trying to tell a story about having only 2 wisdom teeth pulled, and I learned a lesson. Don't ever try to tell a 2 wisdom tooth story, because you ain't going nowhere. The 4 wisdom teeth people are going to parachute in and cut you off at the pass. Halt with your 2 wisdom tooth tale. You will never complete one, trust me. I'm trying to tell my story. You know, I had some wisdom teeth pulled. I had 4 pulled. Oh, okay. No 5, no 9. I had 9 wisdom teeth pulled. All of mine were impacted. They were all coming upside down. The roots were up around my tongue, coming out my nose. They were tusks. I was a warthog. No anesthesia. They pulled them out with pliers. I was eating corn on the cob that afternoon. Pin the blue ribbon upon his chest. That knocks the socks off of my wisdom tooth tail. Why do people need to top other people? I've never understood it, and I see it all the time. Obviously, people get something out of it. At best, people wait for your lips to stop. Yeah, as soon as... Okay, yeah, you, me! You, me! You see the difference? You see that? Now I do. What is it about the human condition people get something out of that?
So that's obviously really funny. But the question is, what's so great? What is it about the human condition that people get something out of? What is it about our pride or our insecurity that creates this sort of condition? So let me open this up for conversation. What words come to your mind when you think of pride? And I'm not talking about pride in your little brother that got a blue ribbon on a chicken raising contest or whatever people do in that buffet. What words come to mind when you think of pride, maybe like in a biblical sense? Yes.
Flattery.
Flattery in what way?
So like, sort of promoting other things more than they should get credit for.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I kind of think of the synonym of arrogance, which basically brings the phrase to mind, "I'm better than you are."
Hmm. Yeah, like the me monster sort of thing, like
Yeah.
always trying to one up other people. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Maybe in the Bible it even says that it's
Mm-hmm.
sinful to be prideful.
Why do you think that is?
Because we're called to be humble people, we're called to be servants of others. So when we let pride get a hold of our hearts, it really just takes us off the track of what Jesus wants us to do with our lives.
One more?
Vanity, selfishness, conceit.
Yes.
Rebirth.
Yep, good words. Yeah, so pride, I think pride has a lot of meanings and a lot of implications. This self-absorption, self-obsession, arrogance is the word we talk about, sin for sure. Oftentimes you see it manifested in competitiveness and a need to prove ourselves. Basically, fundamentally, what do you think this is rooted in? So that's maybe how it demonstrates itself. We're trying to one-up each other. But what's sort of the roots of pride that make us act in that way? Where does it come from? What's the fundamental belief or worldview that would make someone prideful? You know, this is digging deep for 9 o'clock in the morning, so bear with me here. Yes?
I have more worth than you do.
Okay. So, breaking that statement apart, there's this sense that people have different amounts of worth, and I think I have more than you do. Okay.
Or I want to have more than you do. I might not be sure if I do, but I want to make sure that it looks like I do.
Yeah. So, relative worth, I'm evaluating myself in relative standing to other people, and I want to position myself so that I have more. So, again, building off of that idea, a couple ideas that have implications for us as Christians. One, the thought that people have different amounts of worth. Is that a Christian idea or not? Another is that I can do something to change my level of worth. Is that a Christian idea or not? We'll dig into some of those things, but you're absolutely right. You're tapping into the right sort of things here. Great job for early reporting. I really do think it comes down to this idea of worth, that all of us want to feel like we have worth, right? We all want to feel like we're valuable. We want to feel good about ourselves. I think that's a pretty standard desire across humanity. The question is how you do that. So pride would say, I do that by increasing my worth relative to other people. I can either look better or make them look worse. Either way, as long as there's a gap there, and I'm on the positive side of that gap, I have more worth, so I feel good about myself. You know, if I have a bigger house than my neighbor, I'm successful because I'm more successful than this person. If I'm better looking than my cousin, I'm a good looking person relative to them. So that's one way we can look at pride. Here's a way that C.J. Mahaney defines pride. He says pride is contending for supremacy with God. Now that's a very sort of theological definition, but here's what this actually means. So going back to this idea of self-worth and relative standing and all those sorts of things. When we look at what the Bible says about humanity, God created everyone, right? God died for everyone. We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So, let's say you maybe are the more attractive person between you and someone else. From a 30,000-foot view, from God's view, guess what? You're still a sinner. You're still going to hell. So congratulations, you're going to be the second nicest looking person in hell. Kind of doesn't really matter at the end of the day. At the same time, though, God died for all of us. So even if you are the worst looking person in the group, guess what? God died for you just like he died for this other person. Fundamentally, on a cosmic scale, our true sense of worth and brokenness is all defined by God. Pride says, you know what, God? I'm not going to define my worth in terms of those things. I'm going to define it in terms of terms I get to choose. So I'm going to pick something arbitrary like my looks or my finances or my intelligence. I'm going to define my worth on that, and I'm going to try and position myself and manage perceptions of other people so that I can increase my worth relative to those things. So pride's saying my view of myself, my priorities, my view of the world is more important than God's. It's supremacy in my life. When you think about pride this way, it's not like, oh gosh, that guy's a little arrogant, probably not a good thing. You think about it in terms of supremacy with God, it's like, whoa, okay, this got real serious all of a sudden. We were just talking about this guy's got a little bit of a big ego. You're making this like a huge issue. But this is a huge issue. Because fundamentally, if you take this approach where I can take my view of the world and replace God's view of the world in my life, then the sky's the limit for what happens, right? Every sin emanates from this idea of pride. God says, love others, and we say, you know what, God, I think I got this better. I think I'm going to take care of myself first and then love others. God says to care for the poor and the orphans and widows, and you say, you know what, God, I think that comfort actually is more important, so I'm going to go this way. Every sin in our lives, at the root of it is this idea of pride, that I know better for my life than God does. My view of myself, my view of the world, my view of humanity takes supremacy over God's. This is why pride is our greatest enemy, because it makes every other sin possible. So a lot of times the way this plays out is, again, my worth, my value is built off of what I think of myself and what other people think of me. So if my worth in life is based on what other people think of me, what am I going to spend all of my time doing? This is not a rhetorical question, this is an actual. If my worth in life is based on what other people think of me, what am I going to spend all my time and resources doing? Yes?
Comparing yourself to others. Comparing
yourself to others, and yes?
Making people think highly of you.
Yes, managing other people's perceptions. I'm not going to get into social media here, but I will just say briefly, the reason social media is hugely popular is because it gives you a really convenient way to manage other people's perceptions of you, to keep them at arm's length, and to present an image that only you want to present. So, and part of that comes down to insecurity and pride. It's not just social media, there's a ton of other ways that we manage other people's perceptions, but it makes sense when you think about it this way. Okay, if my worth is based on other people's views of me, I should spend all my time managing other people's perceptions of me. That is a completely logical train of thought. The problem is that doesn't work out very well because other people's perceptions of you are constantly changing. They have their own insecurities, and so they don't want to value you in the same way that you want to be valued. And so if your worth is built on other people's views of yourself, you're standing on shifting sand. When I think of how this plays out in reality, I think of Marty McFly. Anyone grow up watching Back to the Future, or are y'all too young for this? Please, someone? Okay, yes. This is Back to the Future 2, where he goes into the future. Ironically, the future he went back in 1985 was 2015. So that was like 3 years ago. So we should have hoverboards and flying cars and all this stuff by now, and totally didn't live up to it. But this is this fragile self-worth based on other people's view of yourself. This is how I think of this playing out in practical ways on a day-to-day basis.
What's wrong with my chicken? What did you call me, Griff? Chicken! It's mine! Nobody calls me chicken.
So they go on this big chase and blah, blah, blah. This is like a recurring theme throughout the movies, that anytime someone impugns his honor, he has to step up and defend it. And it's comical, it's exaggerated, right? But the core idea, actually, we do this all the time. We can't let other people think badly of us because, again, my worth is built on what they think of me. So I always have to defend my honor and my reputation because that's where my self-worth comes from. This is why pride is so dangerous. So, on the flip side of this, we often think of pride just in the inflated ego, right? People who are prideful are the ones that are arrogant and think they're amazing. But actually, the other side is true as well. People who have super low self-esteem, that are always inwardly focused, the same idea is true, that they're placing their view of themselves, that they're terrible, above God's view of them, which is that they were created with intentionality and purpose and beauty. So actually both ends of this spectrum, the hugely arrogant person, the person with way low self-esteem, both of those are prideful because they're placing your view of yourself above God's view of you. So, pivoting now to humility. This one I think is a little trickier. What words come to mind when we think of humility? Yep.
Selfless.
In what way?
Just not putting yourself first. Being aware of others and putting their needs before yourself, seeing them as equally important or more important than yourself.
That's great. Anybody else? Yeah.
Understanding that you're not above someone.
Yeah, for sure. One more. Those are pretty good. I can start with those. So let me ask you this: then what sort of image most closely associates with your idea of humility? Is it the guy that's a doormat and gets walked over frequently, or is it the CEO leading a company? Show of hands. Who thinks it's the doormat? You be honest about this. Okay, you all kind of just lifted your fingers. It's hard for me to tell. I'm gonna say like 8 people. Okay, what about the CEO? Okay, so a lot of people on the fence here. Doormat people, tell me why you think doormat.
I mostly just said that because I don't usually picture a CEO as humble, so between the two, more likely to think of the doormat.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
I think like with the doormat, like a lot of times humility is viewed as like putting yourself down, but really it's like having a solid foundation of who you are in God, but not like like you don't have to be walked over and put down to be humble.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we often think of humility as self-deprecation. And when someone comes to your house and is like, hey, this food's good. Oh, no, it's terrible. You know, I can't believe you're eating it. I burned it. You know, it was just awful. You know, have you ever talked to someone like this? And actually it gets really annoying to talk to them because you like try and give them a compliment and they just refuse to take it. And you're like, seriously, it was fine. Like, shut up. You know, as opposed to the person who's like, oh, really? Did you really think it was good? I mean, what about this? You know, they're trying to draw it out. Both of those are kind of obnoxious for the same sort of reason that, again, they're, they can't accept your praise for what it is. The best way, actually, this is some advice for you all. I met a girl one time, I can't remember who it was actually, but whenever time you would compliment her, she just loved your compliments and in a way that was very generous but not insecure. You'd say, hey, you look great today. She's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I just made my day. You're like, you know, and your shoes are awesome too. Like you just want to keep like giving compliments because like you felt so good about complimenting that person because they appreciated it. But it wasn't the thing that defined who they were, right? They weren't needing it. They weren't trying to draw it out because that was their source of security. So when you talk about being secure, it's not the self-deprecating thing. It's appreciating, you know, compliments and things like that. Just because you have this firm foundation. You know, when God is your definition of reality and your definition of self-worth, then anything good from other people is just a bonus on top of that. Anything negative that comes, you know, it's a little ding, but fundamentally your foundation is still secure. Okay, CEO people who thought CEO was more the definition of humility, why did you say that? This goes faster when you talk. I just want to let you know. Yeah.
It's coming from the business side of things. There's lots of times where you can practice servant leadership as the leader, and it's kind of a top-down thing. So there are obviously opportunities for the CEO to mess up and certainly not practice humility, but I think a lot of times if he or she is working for the good of the company and is really doing their best to do a good job, but not take all the credit for it, that they show that they have a team working under them as well, then they can definitely be humbly.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect segue, actually, to this next point. Jim Collins, this pretty famous business researcher, looked at these good to great companies that have been kind of marginal, that had really experienced this tremendous growth over a long period of time. And he examined them to figure out what sort of commonalities they had. And one of the surprising things he took away was that their leaders, or what he called level 5 leaders, like the best of the best leaders, and one of the traits they had in common was humility. That they weren't about building themselves up at the expense of others. They weren't insecure and needed other people to look worse in comparison to them. They could be a servant leader. They could celebrate other people's successes. They don't, have the frame photos of themselves on the cover of Forbes all in their office. It's about something bigger than themselves. It's about the company. So oftentimes, I think, we as Christians, we know that humility is in the Bible. We're supposed to do it. We give at least like passing acknowledgement to that. But I think because we fear being a doormat and we think the real success is being a CEO, we think that we have to choose between success or humility. You can't be confident and be humble. You got to pick one or the other. And most of society would say being confident is the more important thing. So we kind of go that route and pay homage to humility when we need to. But the reality is that these things are actually super intertwined. We just don't have a rich understanding of what humility is. So let's look at what is a definition of humility. This is my definition of humility. Humility is understanding ourselves in right relation to God. Okay, so what does that mean? Understanding ourselves in relationship to God. A few things here. One is that our definition of ourselves is defined by God, not by ourselves. We can't look inward and determine who we are and have our own sense of self-worth. It has to be in relation to God. What is right relation to God? What does it mean to view ourselves correctly in relation to who God is? I think there's 4 things that build into this. The first thing is that we were created. To be created means you have to have a creator. Again, we know this. This is just reminding us of what we know. An omnipotent, all-good God created us, designed us for something. We have purpose that is built into who we are because of the fact that we were created. And we have value because, again, created for a purpose, but also we bear the image of God. God made us like himself to reflect the best of who he is. The sad fact, though, is that we were broken. The fall was pervasive. We have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. There's no corner of creation that was not touched by the fall. All of us are broken. All of us are in need of grace. And we have received that grace. We've been redeemed. Jesus died for all of us, not for some of us, not for the best looking or the most accomplished ones of us. We are all redeemed. So this is what this means. We have value because we were created. We're all broken. We're all in the same playing field. We all need grace, and we've all been given grace. This is a very different way of understanding ourselves compared to the prideful way, which looks at how we compare to other people, how we manage appearances, those sorts of things. So how does this play out? What the first line of Rick Warren's best-selling book, The Purpose-Driven Life, is it's not about you. Purpose-Driven Life sold more copies than almost any other book in history, I think besides the Bible and maybe 1 or 2 other books. And a lot of those books are bought by people who weren't Christians because we're all searching for this purpose. And he starts out by saying it's not about you. This is one of the most fundamental realizations of humility, that you are not designed to do whatever you wanted to do. You were created to be in relationship with God, to glorify God, to be a part of bringing God's kingdom to earth. It's not about you. You are a character in the story, but you are not the story. And again, this kind of runs contrary to the way we talk about, self-fulfillment and, be yourself, be an individual, do whatever you want to do. This really runs contrary to that. But within this, there's a lot of deep truth and freedom about the universe. This is what Rick Warren goes on to say after this line. He says, the purpose of your life is far greater than your own personal fulfillment, your peace of mind, or even your happiness. It's far greater than your family, your career, or even your wildest dreams and ambitions. If you want to know why you were placed on this planet, you must begin with God. You were born by his purpose and for his purpose. When we look so inwardly and lose our anchor with God, we lose our sense of groundedness in life. Because again, God is the definition of who we are and why we are here. This is a way that C.S. Lewis takes this concept and frames it a little differently. He says this: true humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. So again, it's not about the self-deprecation, putting yourself down all the time. It's just an absence of focus on yourself. It's realizing, hey, life is not about me. Life is about God and how I can bring glory to God through my gifts, through my talents, through the resources he's given to me. When we're operating from that sort of purpose, it frees us up to define ourselves and define our self-worth and direct our steps in a different way. So this is kind of part 1, understanding It's about God. The second part is understanding that the brokenness side, understanding the grace you have received in light of our brokenness. As a culture, we don't really like talking about our brokenness and our shortcomings, right? Very few people are posting on Facebook, I had a crappy day today. Here's all the things I did wrong. Here's a picture of my house when it was really dirty. Here's everything I screwed up. Maybe they're venting about something, but for the most part, it's the, the filtered photos that look perfect and everything is just wonderful. We don't like to live in our brokenness, but the reality is that we're all broken. When we're pretending like we're not broken, the only person we're fooling is ourselves. Everyone else knows you don't have it together. They're wondering why you're trying so hard to pretend like you do. We're all on that same playing field, right? And until we understand that, until we understand the depth of our brokenness, we can't actually appreciate grace. Because if you don't have any issues, then you deserve all the good things you've got. If you do have some big issues, then every good thing you have is a gift. I have a cousin whose parents spoiled him a ton, and it was always obnoxious to me when I go to their house, and he was just expecting gifts. Anytime he'd come back from a trip, something's like, all right, what do you have for me now? And he had this idea that, yeah, he was entitled to any good thing that his parents gave him. That's really annoying because we're not entitled to those things. Again, we're all sinners. We deserve one thing, and that's hell. Any good thing that we're given is grace on top of that. And until we understand the depth of our brokenness, we can't really appreciate grace. If you think that you don't have any problems, then logically, you should be angry anytime you're inconvenienced by some stupid human being, because if they understood how great I was, they wouldn't behave this way. But we start with the assumption that we're all broken, we all have grace, we all need grace. We're much more gracious with other people. One of my friends told me a story when he was a kid. His parents were great Christian people, and he had just done something, he was about to get spanked. How many of you got spanked as a kid? I did. I deserved probably more than I actually got. So he's like sitting on his bed in his parents' room, he's about to get spanked, and his parents come in and they say, Andrew, you deserve to get spanked now because you did whatever you did. But instead of spanking you, we have something else for you. And they went to the closet and they brought out a present. And they said, right now you deserve to get spanked, but instead we're going to give you this present, because this is what Jesus did for us when he died on the cross. We deserve death, and he gave us this gift instead. Holy cow. First of all, I would have a ton of presents if my parents had done that. Secondly, that's what grace is, right? It's understanding what you have done nothing to deserve this. In fact, you deserve the complete opposite of this. And instead, you've been given grace. When I think of grace, I think of my wife. We have a great marriage, but we have disagreements sometimes. And when things get heated and frustrated, there are a lot of times when instead of slapping me or storming out of the room or saying unkind things, she lowers her voice. She apologizes for what she's done wrong in that. She asks for forgiveness. And the response I feel to that is overwhelming inadequacy. Oh my gosh. Wow, you're right. I'm sorry for doing this. I reciprocate what she does. Her humility prompts more humility with me. In contrast to when you're being attacked and you assume a defensive position and attack back, and it just escalates and escalates. When I see humility, experience humility, it creates more humility in myself. And it's the same for us with other people. When we really have wrestled with the depth of our depravity and know the grace we've received, we can give grace to other people. So this is what Scripture says about this whole thing. First of all, we're called to be humble. This is not an option. We're commanded to be humble. Be humble and gentle. Completely humble and gentle. Not occasionally humble and gentle. But the good news is, it's actually in our best interest to do this. Maybe the scariest line in all of Scripture for me is James 4:6. God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. You remember God, how he's like omnipotent in everything? Think about God being opposed to you. That should scare you. The idea that God is not on your side and is working against you. That's what God says. He's opposed to the proud. Pride is the root of all sin is pride. It's saying, hey God, I'm supreme over my life, you are not. God is opposed to that because you cannot be a Christian and have pride pervading your life. But he shows favor to the humble. Not only does he show favor, but he exalts the humble. For all of you who want to be exalted, who want to achieve fame, who want to do great things in life, here's the ticket right here. Be humble and God will exalt you. The good news is he's way better at it than we are. We're not actually really good at at elevating ourselves and maintaining that. And after all, Jesus is our example of this. Humility is not just about the fact that we are broken people, right? I've got to be humble because I'm sinful. Again, if humility is about understanding ourselves in right relation to God, even Jesus did this. He says, you know what, I'm the Son. I'm going to bring glory to the Father. This is my right relationship to God. He took the nature of a servant and sacrificed for us. Even Jesus embodied this humility. Just like pride is the thing that enables every sin, humility is the thing that enables every virtue. I can't love you if I'm too self-obsessed with myself. If I think I'm the center of the universe, I can't serve you and I can't love you. I can't be gracious to you, I can't be kind to you because everything revolves around me. Humility, though, is the foundation that everything else builds on. So far, we've talked about the fact that pride is our greatest enemy and humility is our greatest friend. Pride is the root of every sin. Humility is the foundation of every virtue. If we want to be true Christians, we've got to get rid of pride and we've got to chase humility with everything we've got. Humility is understanding ourselves in right relationship to God. And what this creates for us is freedom. 3 different things that it frees us to do. First of all, it frees us to learn. You can't learn anything if you're prideful. Why? Because if you're prideful, you think you know everything already. Or you're so insecure that you can't admit that you don't know something. There's a social science researcher named Carol Dweck, and she talks about this as the fixed versus the growth mindset. 2 different kinds of ways of thinking. And if you don't get anything else in the presentation today, this is really good, so pay attention to this. Fixed mindset people think that your ability to perform is based off of your natural ability. So people who score well on tests because they're good test takers. They're just naturally smarter at taking tests than other people. Growth mindset people believe that your performance is based on the effort you put in. If you score well on tests, it's because you studied harder, prepared better than other people. Here are the implications of those worldviews. Fixed mindset people feel really good about themselves when they're doing well because every time they do well, it's like, hey, guess what? I have a lot of talent. I just succeeded. That means that I'm a pretty good person. I'm pretty talented. When they fail, guess what that means? I didn't do well on this test. I guess I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Maybe this whole thing is a lie. Maybe I'm a fraud. Their whole life comes crashing down as soon as failure happens. Fixed mindset people don't take on new challenges that push them because it's a chance they would fail. And if they fail, that means they're not as good as they thought they were. So you have high self-esteem to a point, but then there's a ceiling to this because it's really fragile. Growth mindset people think my performance is based on the work I put in. So if I want to perform better, I have to work harder. If I didn't perform well, I need to work harder in the future. They're able to take on challenges because a challenge is a chance for them to grow, to get better. And again, life is about getting better, it's about growing, not about performing and proving that you're good. It's about this continual movement forward. At the foundation of the growth mindset is this idea of intellectual humility, the idea that I don't know everything because I'm a finite human being. I'm not great at everything because I haven't put the time in yet, but I can be. If I put the work in, I can grow in this way. If you don't take anything away from Spring Arbor besides intellectual humility and curiosity, you would still be in a great place. Just assuming that, you know what, I might be wrong, my assumptions could be off in this. Let me explore this and check it out and see if I can do a better job of coming to know what's true in the situation, instead of just reinforcing what I think I know. Humility makes this possible. You look at kids and you watch them learn, and they love learning. I mean, little kids, we were talking about 2nd graders earlier. 2nd graders love learning and diving in and figuring things out. They're not studying just to get an A and then moving on. They learn because it's fun to learn. Well, why is that? Because they're learning and they're growing. That's a natural, exciting part of life. They haven't gotten to a place yet where they think that learning is about proving themselves to their professor, to their peers, or to themselves. It's not about the performance, it's just about the natural process of growth. Humility frees us to learn, frees us to explore, because it's not an admission of failure. It's just an acknowledgement that, yeah, I didn't know this, but now I do. That's an exciting thing. Humility frees us to learn. It also frees us to work together. If you are humble, it's not about who gets the credit for this thing, right? I don't need the credit because, hey, I'm pretty insecure in myself already. I can be the dog standing on the bottom and let the cat stand on my shoulder. So guess what? We're all getting ice cubes at the end of the day. Humility frees us to work together because it allows me to acknowledge my weakness and celebrate someone else's gifting and someone else's strength. because your gifting and strength doesn't challenge my own sense of self-worth. I can think that you look great and I don't look great, and I'm still pretty stable because of it. Because my foundation is rooted in this fact that God created me, died for me, redeemed me. Humility frees us to work together and use the body of Christ the way it was meant to be used. We were not designed to be autonomous human beings that go through our entire lives functioning on our own. We were meant to rely on other people that see the world differently, have different gifts than us. But you can't do that if you don't have humility, because it's all about maintaining your perception of yourself as this perfect, complete human being. Humility frees us to work together. Lastly, humility frees us to just delight. If I'm prideful, I can't celebrate your successes because they diminish me. It's all about relative standing. If you're succeeding, that means I'm losing. I can't enjoy success with you. I also can't enjoy the grace I've received because I'm entitled to it. I'm not a broken person. Humility, though, frees us to think, hey, you know what? Gosh, I'm a broken human being. Anytime anything good that comes across my path is a gift from God. I can just enjoy that. I can celebrate with you when you have something good in your lives. I don't have to put you down to make myself feel better. There's so much freedom on the other side of the fear is at the root of pride. Freedom to delight means that we feel like we have nothing to lose, nothing to hide, and nothing to prove. I don't have to be the person that's defending my self-worth for the world. I don't have to manage perceptions for people because my self-worth is not rooted in what you think of me. I'm free to not try and do that because I know that God's got that covered for me, and He's way better at it than I am. So, what does this look like in practice? How do we cultivate this and practice this? The first thing is we got to know our Creator. We can't understand ourselves until we understand the God that made us. Fortunately, God has revealed Himself in thousands of ways through Scripture, through creation, through tradition, through community. The second thing is that we've got to contemplate our shortcomings, not just like write them down once, but wrestle with those on a regular basis. Acknowledge the places you fall short because you can't be humble until you understand the depth of your brokenness. But don't stay there. Don't just wallow in your insecurities. Look for the evidence of grace in your life. Acknowledge the place where God has redeemed you, where God has given you things that you don't deserve at all. When I was in grad school, I first started wrestling with the idea of privilege and what it meant for me as a white man to be privileged. It was not a concept I liked because it basically told me that I didn't earn everything that I had. I was given some privileges out externally, and that did not sit well with me. But eventually, as you read enough about it and think about it, you're like, okay, you know what? I see how there are some advantages to being a straight white Protestant male in America. Okay, yeah, I'll give you that. Well, then we took in foster kids. We had a 6-year-old that was incredibly bright, athletic, funny, but this kid couldn't read and was going to fail kindergarten because he couldn't read. And as we're spending time reading with him night after night, and he's picking things up so quickly and he's gaining so much ground, the privilege bar for me went from up here to down here. Because I realized, yeah, I was privileged because I'm white and Protestant and I had 2 parents in my family, but you know what? I'm privileged because someone read to me at night. I got fed every day. No one hit my mom in front of me and broke my jaw when I talked back. Wow, I was really privileged. And those are things I never would have considered before because you just assume, yeah, that's part of life, you're given those things. But every one of those things was an incredible privilege for me. And when I understand that and grapple with that, and I see somebody walking down the street that I instantly want to put in a box and explain why they are where they are, I recognize I'm where I am because I have an incredible amount of privilege, and that brings responsibility with it. Within that, cultivating gratitude for the grace we've received. Ann Voskamp wrote a great book called 1,000 Gifts. She spent like a year of her life just chronicling all the things she'd been given, 1,000 different things that she was grateful for. And when you operate from this position of gratitude, it's so much harder to get frustrated at the little things in life that don't matter. Calling out the good in others. Again, because of humility, I'm able to identify the good in others without my worth being diminished. Imagine that it is your job in life to find the spark of goodness in other people and to fan that flame, to celebrate the goodness in them and encourage them to be who God created them to be. When you do that, you can rely on your community strengths to compensate for our weaknesses. You don't have to be autonomous. You can seek out other people that can support you in ways that they were designed to. And lastly, abandoning the need to justify ourselves and prove ourselves. My self-worth comes from God. I don't have to manage that for myself. God can do that for me. I've got nothing to hide, nothing to lose, and nothing to prove. This is how the prayer of St. Francis articulates this life of humility. Grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. If I'm really humble and I can serve in a sacrificial way, I can be this kind of agent of reconciliation. I don't have to be the person that has the last word. I don't have to be the person everyone listens to. I can actually serve selflessly and make a difference in the world. This is what Christ calls us to as Christians. So, back to the topic of today. What does this mean for us as Americans? What does this mean for us as members of a certain country in a time where nationalism is rising? This is a question for you. How do we live out humility as individuals and as members of a certain nation? What do these ideas mean? How should they affect the decisions we make on a local and on a national level? What do you think?
One analogy that I kind of came up with when I was thinking about nationalism recently was that if you have a child, you love that child, but you're not going to say that child's better than another child. So for example, you can love, say, America better than any other country without thinking it's better.
Yeah, so we can celebrate ourselves and appreciate who we are without needing to diminish other countries. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Basically? Yeah, absolutely.
I think as Americans, we feel really sort of sound in our resources. We feel almost isolationist in a way, like we want to spread our freedom around the world, but at the same time, we just like it's our right, it's our country, and we don't really want other people to sort of take over it all. It's our thing, and it's something we cultivate and want to keep for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As a country, I think as a country we're very privileged as Christians that like when we look at other countries, like why can't they like stand war? Why can't they do like things right? And like why do we have people that are like living in like terrible conditions that we can go to? But as a country, like we are privileged, and so we should recognize that like we just because we have things like that doesn't mean that we should not have that, or that we should be not, or that we should look down on them, or
I think a unique challenge for us as American Christians is that our society encourages us to live autonomously and to live individually and to live in isolation without any sort of responsibility to anyone else. Yet as Christians, we have to live with that tension of I'm to live in community. And so I think the biggest challenge, for me personally is to juggle that outside external sort of force to try to be independent and be autonomous and do my thing, yet at the same time live in a way where I'm depending on my community and my community can depend on me. And I can speak truth and love to my community and they can call me out and love too. And I think that's something that relates to humility in a large way, because if I'm living in my society independently and I don't allow people to speak truth and love to me, my pride can run really deep. But when I'm living in community with someone, if I let my walls down and allow people to speak truth and love into me, then those weeds, so to speak, of pride can be pulled out at an exponential rate, because I'm allowing the Lord to refine me through them.
One of the most humbling times of my life was when we took in foster kids. We don't have any kids ourselves right now, though. We have one on the way. And man, it was just chaotic for a lot of that. You can imagine going from having no kids ever to having a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old overnight, literally. And then just trying to figure that out. And we had to rely on our community to support us because we just couldn't do it on our own. And it was both the most humbling time of my life and one of the most deeply satisfying, because as we had to become more interwoven with our community, and that brought such great joy. Almost like we were designed to do it that way. And yeah, I think what you're saying, Meg, is absolutely true. That we can agree with these ideas intellectually, but if we're not practicing that interwoven community on a daily basis, then it's easy for us to just drift off. I think this is especially true as we think about the different us versus them debates in America right now, whether it's black versus white, citizen versus immigrant, whatever those things are. When we're talking about people that we hold at arm's length, that we don't interact with on a daily basis, it's so much easier to make judgments about who they are, what their motives are, what their issues are. But when you do life with those people, it's so much more humbling to realize the responsibility we have, our own brokenness in the midst of that, incredibly huge. I think something else you mentioned is the privilege we have. And yeah, this is a frustrating one for me, knowing that, number one, gosh, first of all, we're a nation of immigrants. And so as we think about loving our immigrants well, it doesn't mean we open up all of our borders or close them necessarily, but understanding that we are all here because someone else immigrated for us. Okay, that creates some intellectual humility. None of us created the world we have right now. We were all born into it and are privileged because of that. And so as we're protecting and preserving that, again, these are a lot of privileges we've been given. What is our responsibility with those privileges around the world, within our territory, et cetera? There's a ton of implications for that here. One big one may just be assuming that, you know what, maybe we're not right about everything. That would be a big change of policy or perspective in the country, to assume that we're not doing everything perfect, that maybe other countries know some things that we don't know, that us trying to duplicate America across the world maybe doesn't work too well, or at least duplicating all of America across the world. I'll leave you to think about this some more. I'm going to wrap up with one quote here. Or first of all, summarize kind of where we've been. Pride is our greatest enemy, humility is our greatest friend. Pride is the root of all sin, but humility is the foundation for all virtue. Humility is understanding ourselves in right relation to God. He created us, He gave us purpose and value. We're broken, but He's redeemed us. When we embrace this worldview, we gain real freedom. Freedom to learn, freedom to work together, and freedom to just delight. Lastly, we can cultivate and practice humility by celebrating and knowing our God, owning our failures, and basking in that grace. The last quote here is this, from Michael Ramsey. Thankfulness is a soil in which pride does not easily grow. If you want to start being humble today, start with thankfulness. Start with gratitude for the gifts you've been given, the privileges you've been given, the grace you've been given in your life. Thanks. Have a great rest of your day.